This week in post, unscripted, uncut, it's a live edit. Hi everyone, I'm Scott Davenport. Welcome to In Post. Thanks for joining me today. Today is a live edit. A live is in air quotes. It's not that I'm streaming this live. Rather, I'm taking a photo from my library I've never worked on before and put it through the processing start to finish. Just press record and we see what we end up with at the other side. So there may be more stammering on my part, some mistakes, some backtracks, and that's all okay. This is just really the stream of consciousness thought process as I go into a photo. These videos tend to run a little longer than my normal ones, so you may want to grab a cup of coffee or something like that to keep you tided over while you're watching. And let's get into it. So I'm going to do this one today all in on one photo raw because the 2018.5 release just came out as recently as I record this, about a week ago. So here we are in the develop module. And the first thing I like to do with the photo is kind of an overall image assessment. And this is from Soberante's Point in the Big Sur area. I shared some details about that shoot earlier this week on In the Field. And as I look at things, I certainly want the photo to be a little warmer. The center area, I got some cloud cover happening out here, so this got a little bit dark. Maybe to bring that up. There's a few little distracting elements out here, a couple of signposts, the car. I don't mind the power lines. That's fine. That feels a little more natural to me. What else? The horizon line, I want to check that. It looks a little bit bowed. And other things. This lower right corner is a little unattractive, but I think that will get taken care of through some vignetting, so I'm not expecting to do a lot of cleanup work there. So with that, let's get into the real fundamentals. The first thing I want to do is just check this horizon line and whether or not we're needing to correct the lens warp and so forth. So let's do this. I'm going to move the cursor just outside of the crop tool, and I'll get a finer grid. And as I rotate that around, that horizon line looks pretty good. Let's visit the lens corrections. Open up the manual section. And let's see about, what do we do with the distortion here? If I pull that out, so let's push it really far so we can see what's happening. And now I start to pull that back. I'm watching the screen and not the slider. And that feels better. What did I end up? 11. So I'm going to check this again. 0, 11. I like that little adjustment. I was very, very wide on this shot. Let's see. Yeah, full out 16 millimeters. So, all right, I needed a little extra adjustment on this one. So be it. As far as the crop is concerned, returning to that, now I'll just fine tune that rotation. Matter of fact, let me just use the level tool. We'll grab a point there. A point there, little adjustment, and that is looking good. Do I need to pan this around at all? Not really. I'm not losing anything of particular importance. If anything, I'll slide it as far as I can to the left. That looks good, and we'll apply that change. I want to check that upper corner. Yeah, that did happen. A little tiny bit of blue up there, so the simplest thing to do is just tug that in ever so slightly. And that should take care of that. All right, cool. Okay, so let's get into the overall processing here. Back into tone and color, and let's close down the info pane so we can see all the sliders and everything. Overall, this is pretty well exposed. Quickly check histogram. Okay, a little bit of blowout up in the sky here, which I expect, shooting into the sun. Let's first play with the profiles. I'm just going to hover over a few of these and see if there's any that I like more. Vivid is pretty good. Landscape, the yellows and greens look a little odd to me. And standard versus, let's go around this way, versus vivid. And as I look at the two, vivid looks like too much for me. So I'm going to keep with standard and adjust a few things here. We'll pull back the highlights to start with because there's a lot of highlights going on up in that upper left corner. I don't want to bring it all the way down. I start to crush it and it starts to take on a little bit of an artificial feel. I don't mind there being a little bit of blowout. I'm already thinking in terms of brightening up this area. So I don't want to make this too dark and then have this being bright. It wouldn't feel right. Let's see. Black point and white point. I'm going to press and hold the J key while I'm working that. Nudge back the white a little bit. Again, I'm not worried about a tiny bit of blowout in the very hot spots there. Let's check out the black point. Let's push this around until we start to see some clipping. There we go. We'll pull that back. Maybe around there. I like what that's doing to these darker trees. That's already giving me more dimension in the foreground and midground. Add a little bit of basic contrast here. Get down into the color area. Add some vibrance. Let's check temperature. Let's just start with an auto. See how that does for me. Very small change. As shot. Oh gosh, less than 20 points Kelvin here. What about now? Daylight will make it probably too warm. Really not much of a change there either. Looks like auto did a pretty good job there. I think we'll work on warmth with some of the filters when I bring this over into effects, because yeah, this is going to land in effects after develop. All right, so I do want to nudge around the haze slider a little bit just to see what we're getting there, because there's some particulates in the air. I push it down really far. You can see, great, I'm picking up some of that nice, cloud bank back there, but the rest of the scene gets kind of muddy. So we'll balance that somewhere around there. Looks good. And again, there's no magic number for the sliders. I'm just watching the screen as I make the adjustments. What else? Let's play with shadows a bit. Open that up a little bit more. That's feeling better. And I'm okay to have the edges get a little brighter than I might normally want. I will end up adding a vignette, and so that'll be kind of a counteract to what I'm doing here with the shadows slider. Quick check. Can't even speak. Let's say a quick check here, before and after. So this is before our changes, and this is after. So this is already shaping up nicely. I certainly want more contrast in the hills and the flowers. I do want to try to get these yellows to pop a little more, but I'm going to have to be careful about going overboard with the greens. It's going to be a balancing act. I don't want the water to get any crispier than it is. For the record, I did actually try a long exposure in this location as well. And this kelp bank that's out here, all this stuff here, it's not moving around very much. So in the long exposure, it just looks like an out of focus mess. So besides the flowers and everything moving around, when I took the long exposure, I thought, oh, okay, maybe I can take a little bit of the edge off of this this choppy water. But this kelp sitting there, it just looked absolutely terrible. So that just didn't work out. No blending for this one. Before I move into effects, the last few things are just some basic cleanup here. So let's zoom in up over here, get our retouch brush, make that a little smaller, take care of that little bird that's flying through. Okay. I'm holding down the space bar and dragging over. And then for these, I'll use the perfect eraser to give me a little content aware action. I'll take care of that little signpost and that car. Nice. Perfect. I guess it lived up to its name, the perfect brush. And maybe just a couple of these little white dots that are out here, just so that's not going to take away the road and the power lines. Again, I'm happy with. Keep that. All right, what else needs to happen? There's still a bit of more atmospherics in the upper part of the scene. I certainly want to get some contrast and some warmth in here, maybe a little bit of a glow. Let's do this. Let's take care of maybe the upper part of the scene with a local gradient. I'll just drop that on here. And something around there. Now, I don't want to underexpose, which is the default for the tool. What I do want to do is perhaps add in a little bit of extra contrast up in there. Maybe a little structure. Trying to just cut down a little more through those atmospherics. I wish I had a dehaze slider in here that I could adjust just the part of the scene. I don't have that, unless it's, I don't think they've made something hide in here that I didn't know about. No. Okay. So that's good. Let's move into the effects module. So back to overall settings, into effects, and let's begin with the contrast add. So let's get dynamic contrast going here. Now, by default, I think this is gonna be too much, and yeah, certainly it's a little crispy for my taste here. So I'll take the opacity slider, bring that down. Now I'm gonna toggle it off and on, and I'm watching the water. Gosh, I like how it's cutting through some of the haze. So let's try this. So where I am in my brain right now is I like that the dynamic contrast cut through a little bit of that haze that's over the whole scene. I don't prefer that it added extra contrast to the water itself. So I'm going to try adding a second dynamic contrast filter, but take contrast in the negative direction. Okay, so we'll add one more, and I'm going to take everything down in the opposite direction. And so what's happening is the water is getting softer. Now I'll adjust opacity, and I'm just watching the water, and I'm just kind of clicking around back and forth, watching the water. So before and after, that's still too much. I'm trying just to soften that scene. This is not working as well for me. Let's instead try, actually let's try the sunshine filter. This is something I wanted to add anyway to the scene to brighten this up, and that might have a softening effect on the water as well. Let's see here. That's pretty nice. I think I want to tone it down off of this upper edge. So in the masking area, I'll open that up so we can see what's going on with the mask. I'll grab a masking bug, just drop it on the scene here. Rotate this around and just feather it out from this corner. So what's happening now is we're not losing that bit of cloud detail there, but we're gaining a nice warmth and pop here. What else? Let's start looking at these colors here, the oranges, the yellows and the greens. So we'll start with a color enhancer. Now, if I click on foliage, this is going to go over the top, like crazy over the top. And if I click on sky, it's going to go the opposite direction, right? We're going to get kind of nutty on the colors. Actually, you know, this one isn't too bad. Fall. Let's take the opacity down a little bit. And right now I'm just watching the foreground. I know that it's getting hot up in here and in the sky. Even the sky doesn't look so bad, but those hills look a little bit day glow. All right, let's try this. A couple of things. Open up the masking area, and I'm going to use a color range mask. Actually, no, I'm not going to use a color range mask. I want to get it out of these greens somewhat, so I think I'll just use the masking brush. Paint out mode. Turn on the perfect brush. Let's set the opacity of the brush. It's already at 24. Let's bring that up to maybe 60. It's a little bit smaller. And so I'm going to take some of that color off of the green areas. And this is going to be a bit of a what do I call it? Imperfect mask, but we can see what's going on here. Now this area it worked better. Let me undo those 3 strokes that I just did. Turn off the overlay. I'm going to hover the center of the brush over this more green area, and I'm going to press and hold the command key. That's going to lock the color selection. So as I work through here, and we'll test it in this area first, what we should see is like the undersides of those flowers getting affected, but not so much the tops where the yellow is. That's nice. So I'm going to do that same trick through here. Command, press and hold, and that's going to be Control on a Windows machine. I'll do that section, and then one more time over here, do that section. All right, get through there. Good. Okay. Next, I need to take the edge off of the color change up in this area. I'll use that same Command and Control shortcut trick. We'll brush that out of there. Let's take a look. Maybe that one I need to be a little more open on. So I won't use the, let's actually turn off the perfect brush and lower the opacity some. Smaller brush and just kind of edge that off of the top of all those hills there. So I'm just kind of wiggling my way down the line there. And let's take a look at this color enhancer before and after. So this is before and this is after. That's nice. It's giving a nice rise to the yellows that are in the foreground. That's feeling pretty good. Getting close to finishing this up. There's 2 things left that I really want to do here. Is number 1 is add a little more detail into the cliff face, especially the one that's facing the scene, and then add a vignette. So let's concentrate on this area of the photo now, and maybe even some of these hills to just add a bit of extra dimension to it. So let's do that with a local, well, let's do this. We've got masking tools, and they're pretty darn great. Let's do a second dynamic contrast. Now I'm only watching this part of the scene because this is where I want to apply it. As a matter of fact, let's do this. We'll invert the mask. I'm going to grab a masking bug. I'll change the shape to the center, and we'll click on that section. Actually, let's switch that over to edges. Actually, this is not working at all. That's interesting. Invert that again, and let me add the bug and switch it over to edges. Okay, that's working better. So what we're doing here is just limiting the contrast to the inside of this oval, and especially the inner portion of the oval. And why I want to do that is now as I work the sliders, so we can just do before and after, we're going to see that change here. Now that is dulling the colors quite a bit, or at least it appears that way to my eyes. And that might be an artifact of, it's definitely doing something that I'm less of a fan of. Let's see if I need to play with that vibrance. I got to deal with the color part of this first. If I don't get the color right, there's no point in making that adjustment. That's better. Let's see. Let's tone back the strength of the effect. I like what's happening on the cliffs. I'm just not as much of a fan of what's happening in the hillside here. Before and after. That's better. Let me take a step back and just look at the scene as a whole. So I'm going to do /key. This is what we had before. This is what we have after. It feels better, and maybe that was all I needed to do is take a step back from it. I will do one more thing. I'm going to take that contrast on this section and pull it down even a little bit more. I do need to do some cleanup because this mask looks like this, right? It's covering more things. Let's change our mask overlay to red so we can see where this is affecting and where it's not. So I need to clean this stuff up. I'll use the brush. I'll use the perfect brush. I don't want the contrast at all, so 100%. I'm going to paint out. I'm just going to run this along this edge. Let's get in the water here, and this will be a series of single clicks just to work my way through around the edges. I will need to be more careful when I get into these darker parts of the water, because those tones will be similar to some of the darker parts in the cliff, and I don't want to take away contrast from the cliff. Okay, I just did a Command or Control R to turn off the perfect brush now that I've got space to work. We'll finish up that area there. Command or Control R again, so I can work in these detailed areas here. And maybe a couple more clicks in that section there. And this is just the tidying work. Take it away from that cloud. And then I'm going to do a Shift X to change to paint in mode and bring that contrast into that last little finger of land. You notice I said Shift X and not X. That is something that changed in PhotoRaw 2018.5. I've got a different video that reminds you of that, explains the backstory on why that change happened. So check that video out if you want to know the details behind Shift X versus X. I'm going to do Shift X again to go back to paint out, take it off of the sky there. A couple of single clicks. And the very last thing I'm going to do is just add a slight feather to that mask. Maybe a little bit more. That's just going to soften the edges, especially around that hillside there, up in this area here. Looks like I got an errant brush stroke. Shift X, paint that in right over there. Let me turn off the perfect brush and do that again so I get a faster result. Don't have to have edge detection working for me when we're just painting over a big area. Okay, turn off the mask view and let's take a look at that before and after. That's nicer. It's adding a little more into the cliffs. I like the color on the hills. The last thing we'll do here is add a vignette. Grab the vignette filter. And I'll start with Big Softy, which is usually too much for my tastes. Back off the strength of it. Let's take a look at where it's positioning things here. That's actually not bad. I mean, this is where the scene is. This is the story of the scene. So put the filter, or sorry, the feather back up at 100%. Double check this one more time. Make sure I'm not darkening too much. Be up there. And increase the size a little bit. I don't want to take too much off the edges. And I think we'll call this, this one I'm going to call done. Let's see, before. And then after. Let's see, really quick recap what we did. Added some dynamic contrast. So, basic processing. We did our contrast, black point, white point, things like that. Did a little adjustment to the crop and to the horizon level. Then we went to filters. We did dynamic contrast. We added sunshine to just this area of the scene. Why don't I run this down for you? That'll be a little bit easier to see, right? So we added dynamic contrast, scene overall. Sunshine filter to add a little bit of warmth and glow, but kept it tamed on that upper left corner. The color enhancer to really attack the yellows, make those pop a little bit, and we backed it off of these greens in between the yellows, so you get a little more color separation there. A second round of dynamic contrast to the midsection of the scene and the hills here, really wanting to get the cliffs to have more punch, and then added a vignette to finish it up. So that's going to take us to the end of the photo. And let's see, I think tip of the week for me, I think as a reminder, is the sunshine filter. I haven't used that in quite a long time. That was a nice fit for this particular location, this particular scene. Added a nice bit of warmth and just a touch of the right level of softness to the flowers. It didn't lose the detail, but it gave it that, kind of that ethereal, little bit of glow to it. That's going to do it for this week's In Post. Hope you've enjoyed the live edit. Let me know if you got questions. If you were going to try something different as you're watching this and you thought, oh, I would do this or I would do that, leave that in the comments. It's always interesting to hear how other photographers approach their photos. And even if we had 10 photographers lined up at this location, I'll bet that we'd all come away with 10 different photos. We each have our own take on the scene. And that's going to do it. I guess I already said that. So until next time, my name's Scott Davenport. Happy shooting.